hard as some parts of the state. It's about 8 a.m. Monday morning, and the line in front of the Division of Workforce Services was 30 yards long. Some are here to apply for unemployment, others are here for job assistance. Inside, clients fill out applications for unemployment compensation and scan an online database of regional job openings. Division of Workforce Services employees conduct client interviews and help connect hundreds of people daily to local employers. They often see a surge of clients Monday mornings, probably from layoffs the previous Friday. Which industries are cutting their workforces?
There is no one area that has not had layoffs that I know of.
Jagers says it all started last summer when construction layoffs boosted Division of Workforce Services traffic. Other industries followed. But what happens to workers and their families following a layoff?
It affects a lot of people. I mean, if you don't have money, then you don't have money going around for families. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that don't have jobs and suffering for no food. I mean, that's the way I look at it.
I interviewed a Division of Workforce Services client filing for unemployment. Mike Webster's case is most extreme. Both he and his wife were laid off.
It affects your whole circle of life, you know, that whether it's health, relationships with your family, happiness, self-esteem, confidence, feeling of worth, whatever you want to call it.
Unemployment can threaten the most basic human needs.
They foreclosed on the house, and so then we gradually moved from that to a duplex to a motel to wherever, and then we had to separate for a while because it was just not financially able to stay together. Overall goals, I guess that's to get back to head above water. It's a nightmare, you know. You're up and down and you don't know where the next dollar's coming from.
Due to the construction crunch, Mike has only been able to secure temporary jobs, and he does what he has to.
I count on it. It's a given plasma every week, twice a week.
So what should people do if they are laid off?
Walk in the door the next day. If they've lost their job through no fault of their own, there generally isn't any problems.
This is important because it usually takes 3 weeks to receive unemployment compensation from the date a claim is filed with the Division of Workforce Services. Despite hardships from the recession, Mike is keeping his head up.
No matter what, as far as the situation goes with the job, as long as you always think that something will turn up tomorrow, the next day, next week, whatever, and you hold on to that you'll make it. I mean, sometimes it seems like you won't, but you do. You still make it.
Reporting for On the Hill, I'm Tony Cosgrove. It's a fact that we are currently in the greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression.
However, the unemployment rates have reached far below the 30% they reached during the 1930s.
On the Hill's Kelly Miller joins us to discuss the similarities between our current recession and that of the Great Depression.
With the current economic downturn, it has some people wondering whether or not history does repeat itself. The stock market crash of 1929 left many people without work. But in less industrialized areas of the United States, people had been living in depressed times for nearly a decade. Born in 1931 on a tobacco farm in North Carolina, Dr. Willard Gatewood, a retired history professor, contemplates the similarities and differences between now and then.
I never thought of our family as poor, but I'm sure a lot of other people did, because that's all I had ever known. Agriculture had been in a slump for 10 years before 1931, and declining prices and all the indices of prosperity were going south. It was primitive, very primitive. Very few people had electricity. The community I lived in got electricity 2 years, I think, before, or maybe 3 years before I was born, about 1928. So we always had refrigerators and that kind of thing. But none of the tenant houses or none of the sharecropping houses had electricity till much later. A lot of people made their own clothes. Sewing machines did a good business in the Great Depression. and almost every household had a Singer sewing machine, a pedal machine. There were a lot of hobo type people who would come to do yard work or little jobs you had just for food. And we had that all the time. And I remember those people that came. Some of them, later got on their feet, became prosperous and solid citizens. Probably the people who fared worst in the Depression were those who were already poor and those who were disabled. The Social Security Act or similar acts helped to take care of the disabled people.
Other social recovery programs like the WPA and the CCC put young people to work when there were no jobs to be had.
In all parts of the country, the letters WPA are a symbol of progress and improvement. On buildings under construction, they mean the replacement of inadequate public facilities by new, well-planned structures. On buildings under repair, they mean the preservation of existing structures for greater utility. Many thousands of such jobs as these dot the map of the United States, giving work and hope to people who can't find jobs, impetus to retail trade and heavy industry, and permanent improvements to a host of communities for the years to come.
Put young men to work, men between the ages of 18 and 25. They made $25 a month and they had to send 20 home. If you compare the statistics, unemployment, for example, I think Arkansas's unemployment, which is one of the lowest in the nation, is about 7 or 8%. In the Depression, it got as high as 25%. A quarter of the adult working population was without a job. And so you created work. The university campus is a living example of that. There were people who believed that he was bringing the country to rack and ruin because he was spending so much money. By 1936 and 7, you could see evidences of the Depression waning.
Things began to falter in the late 1930s, but the war served to fully pull the economy out of the slump.
By the time I entered high school, World War II had started. The war changed everything. A lot of changes had taken place. The population had shifted from the country economy, from agriculture to industry of various sorts.
Having lived through the Roosevelt administration, Gatewood sees many similarities between FDR and President Obama.
I think they are two people very much alike. Chief Justice of the United States Oliver Wendell Holmes first met Roosevelt. He said, a second-class intellect, but a first-class temperament. Taking people, the American people, getting on the radio, taking these people into his confidence with the fireside chats. Obama, living in a different technological age, essentially does the same thing, wanting to make government more transparent and all of that. Both men are very articulate. That goes a long way in politics. If you can say things and say them properly, correctly, and eloquently.
Comparing then to now, Gatewood remains optimistic about the current generation's ability to cope.
None of this is to suggest that it's immune to the present day financial crises, because that's felt everywhere. But it's of a different kind than that of the 30s. We still have the ambition for our children to have it better than we had it, even though we didn't have it so bad.
Reporting for On the Hill, I'm Kelly Miller.
The economy has not just affected America, it has impacted the entire world.
Miran Gitschke joins us now with a special report on the effect of the economy on international students.
Thanks, Tony. Well, around the world, there is an increasing trend to send a good chunk of students to other countries for higher education. In 2006 alone, 3 million students were enrolled for higher education.